Hello. In this video, we're going to cover how to categorize our expenses within QuickBooks. We've already set up our custom chart of accounts. Some of the basic navigation stuff we do go over in other videos, but I'm going to hit that again very quickly once again in this video. So we're on our dashboard screen. We have all of our bank accounts linked up. We've already customized our chart of accounts. Now we need to start categorizing our expenses for the month, put them in the right category, and then those categories produce our reports, our profit and loss statement that we're going to use to make decisions about our business. So we can get to the place, our bank feed, where we categorize our transactions, either by clicking on one of these accounts here, or by coming over here to banking, and then scrolling across the top to find the bank account that we would like to work on. We're going to actually start on the business credit card account in this example company. Okay, so transactions come in the For Review tab. We need to categorize them and then add them to QuickBooks. When we do that, they move from the For Review tab to the In QuickBooks tab. Once they're in the In QuickBooks tab, they are compiled and produce the reports for us. And the reports will be covered in a separate video. So let's take a look. You'll notice we have some transactions in black and we have some transactions in green. The green transactions are the ones where QuickBooks feels that they have a good guess at what they think that transaction should be. They're memorized transactions. Most of the time they're right. Sometimes they are wrong. So you can quickly go through and take a look. Let's find a new expense that QuickBooks hasn't seen before and decide how to categorize it. Let's take a look at this one. Namecheap, it's in black. This is their suggestion, but let's take a look at all of our expenses. First, let's begin by adding a payee. So we're going to add Namecheap as the vendor. Once we do this once, every time QuickBooks sees this description come through, they're going to automatically record that payee for you. So we're going to click the plus sign to add Namecheap, vendor, save. Okay, and it fills in for us. Let's take a look at all of our different categories that we have in QuickBooks here. A lot of these we created ourselves. Some of these were already brought in with QuickBooks, and we may or may not use their accounts. We can even delete the expense accounts from QuickBooks that we know we're not going to use. So we've got some Etsy shop expenses, bank fees. We've created a blog expenses account or website expenses and have a couple sub accounts there. And here's where they're suggesting website expenses. We'll consider that. We've got some book production expenses with lots of sub accounts. And then various other legal professional, office, general administrative, QuickBooks, fees. That's for when you're accepting, when you use QuickBooks for invoicing. Supplies, taxes, training, all sorts of stuff. In this case, I'm pretty happy. Namecheap is a domain registration website. So we're going to call that under our blog expenses. We're going to call that website expenses. And we're going to add it. Okay. So from the spent category, our expenses, that has been added. Then we've got some things in green. Google Apps. They're suggesting blog expense, blog tools and services. I agree with that. Let's click add. Maybe there are several things in a row that we agree with. So I agree with where that is going. I agree with where that is going. And I agree with where that is going. So I could go down the line and simply click add, add, add. Or if I had a whole group, I could do batch actions, accept selected, and they are now accepted. So you can see once you get in a rhythm, how quickly you could go through categorizing your transactions each month. Let's go over what you would do if an expense really should be coded to two different places. I'm going to find an expense here. Let's do this one. QuickBooks is kind of suggesting this Bluehost should go to Etsy shop expenses. That's not correct. So we're going to adjust that one. First, I'm going to add the vendor, create a new one. QuickBooks is going to remember this next time Bluehost comes through as an expense. And let's say the Bluehost should really go into two different places. It doesn't, but we're going to use this as an example. Let's pretend Bluehost is the name of a craft store. Let's pretend you're a DIY blogger and you buy materials to do projects with. And then you also buy office supplies. So let's say that this Bluehost store, you purchase both office supplies and you purchase supplies and materials for your blog projects. And speaking of that, so we have a supplies and materials expense account here, and that's what we're going to use in our example. But if it was supplies and materials that directly related to your blog, you might want to make a new supplies and materials account and put it under blog expenses. That's up to you. It just depends on how you want to visualize these accounts and categories on your profit and loss statement. And like I said, we'll cover the profit and loss statement in a different video. So let's go back and find our supplies and materials. And let's say $112.07, according to our receipt, which we hold on to at the store called Bluehost, was $112.07. Now you'll notice that there's this counter here. And this is really helpful to make sure that you don't make a mistake. So the original amount means that that's the amount of the expense that came through the bank feed. And the difference, watch it change as I move on to another line. It calculates how much we've already split, what the original amount is, and what the difference is. And so that way we can easily balance our amount, because however we split it, it has to agree to the $227.76. Let's pretend that the rest is office supplies. So other general and admin expenses, or maybe we could do office expenses, whatever you prefer. I don't have to calculate from my receipt what amount was office. I could. I mean, if you wanted to make sure, no matter what, you got this split down to the penny and there was no possibility for error, that's fine. But really, this breakout is for our purposes. So if it were me, if I knew 112.07 was supplies, I would just type in that 115.69, different zero, we're good. And then I would hit save and add. Now in this case, Bluehost is not a store where I bought supplies and materials or office expenses. So I'm going to cancel, but I wanted to show you this split transaction. It can really come in handy if you are buying multiple types of items at one single place. It could also be helpful, maybe you run two different blogs and you have an expense category for this blog supplies and that blog supplies. You'd have to have two separate expense categories to track those, but you could split it out that way as well. So I'm going to hit cancel. But once again, this is on every time you click on a transaction, you've got the option to split or add. And the same is true for revenue. That's showing up as a transfer, which it is. I'm going to cover transfers later, but you've got split and add for revenue as well. Okay, I actually, just to do a few more transactions categorizing, we're going to code Bluehost, back up here to blog, website expenses. And maybe I should take a minute to talk about the different types of expenses and what I code there. Bank charges would be things like fees. I'm not going to talk about Etsy because you're a blogger. Blog advertising, if you do Facebook, something like that, or Google advertising. Graphic design, I like to put things like the images that are purchased for post images, or maybe if you hire somebody to help with that. Tools and services I use for all of those little subscription things, Board Booster, Tailwind, Adobe, Google Apps, things like that. There's all sorts of little subscriptions that you use as a business owner. Website expenses, I like to code everything like the domain registration, hosting, things like of that nature. In this example, we've got book production expenses. So if you create ebooks, you could create your own section there. Donations would be if you make a charitable donation from your business, code it there. Donations aren't deductible as a business expense, but if you itemize your taxes, they're deductible on Schedule A, so it's important to separate them out in your business finances. Here we have just kind of like a general graphic design. Legal and professional is any lawyers or accountants that you're paying. I think office supplies and general admin is fairly self-explanatory. Supplies and materials. I'm going to cover taxes in a minute. I think I added this account, training and research, or you could call it education and training, anything like that to categorize all those courses that you buy to learn about different things, or business books that you buy, things like that. Okay, so back to, I probably should have done that earlier in the video. This one is going to go to website expenses, and we're going to add that. Okay, so we talked about donations, so let's pretend this was a donation. Just find that, and like I said, if you're donating to a charity from your business account, code it, create a donations account if there's not one already created, and separate that out because your business profit and loss is passed through to your personal. You're not going to take this on your Schedule C. You're going to take this on your Schedule A. I have a tax book if you need more explanation on that. Let's see what else I wanted to make sure. Oh, estimated taxes. Let's cover that. I'm going to switch over to business checking. So if you need to make estimated tax payments, this is a payment made to the IRS. So that is estimated tax payment. Let's add the IRS here. As a vendor, save. Okay, you can do one of two things. You will already have a taxes and licenses expense account. Let me scroll up to expenses. And the taxes and licenses account automatically pulls over from QuickBooks. So you will have that account. And that's where all of your estimated income tax payments will go, to taxes and licenses. Sales tax is handled differently, and sales tax is not covered in the blogging course because most likely you do not have sales tax. But this would be for your estimated income tax payments. You could code them here. If you wanted to separate out payments that you made to federal and to state, you can create separate accounts. So that could make it easy when you're paying your taxes at the end of the year to know how much you paid to each. And I think I'm going to separate it out. So federal estimated taxes. I'm going to go, so I just typed that. I should mention, I could have gone back over here to accounting and chart of accounts before I created this new account. But I just want to do this on the fly and not have to leave this screen and come back and find where I was. So I just started typing in the box. It's going to give me the option to add an account. It's an expense account. The type is down here in taxes paid. We already have the name because that's what I typed in, and I'm going to hit save and close. And then it creates that account for me right on this screen, and I can simply add. And there I go. I'm good. Okay, that's all the basics for coding and categorizing your expense transactions. So as you can see, it can be a real quick matter to simply run down your list of expenses every month, change a couple things, add a bunch of others, and then before you know it, you're completely done with your bookkeeping for the month. So that's it for the expense video. In other videos, we're going to cover things like owner's equity and transfers and paying the credit card. Okay,